Rogers TV talking up Mississippi State, and why not? The Bulldogs are 16th ranked in the college football playoff rankings, 7-2. That's 3-2 in the SEC following a win over UMass. Not very impressive in the first half, but they poured it on for an 11-point win, 34-23. We bring in Daniel Black. You can join him on For Whom the Cowbell Tolls. That's the Mississippi State platform on SB Nation. Daniel, how are you tonight?
I'm just fine, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. And so Mississippi State will give it a go at, I was about to say the number one team in the country, but technically number two, and they are number two. That's what the playoff rankings tell us. Most people would consider them to be the best team in the country, the most complete or dominant team in the country, a little bit banged up heading into this game. Let's start with, hey, your guy, Nick Fitzgerald, versus Nick Saban in a sense, because Nick Saban is the defensive guru, and has been for quite some time. So he's had trouble at times in his career dealing with athletic quarterbacks, dynamic quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson in that category the last two championship games. Don't want to elevate Fitzgerald to that class, but obviously he's going to bring some of the same skill set. So your thought about Fitzgerald going up against the Tide?
Well, you mentioned it. I mean, the last few quarterbacks that Alabama struggled with have been dual threat running passing quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson in last season and then Chad Kelly in 2015. Nick Fitzgerald's gone up. This is without a doubt the best defense Mississippi State will have faced. And, even Dan Mullen said it, the most complete team in the country. Dan Mullen said in his press conference that we are excited to go up against the best team in the country. But this season, Nick Fitzgerald's gone up against two, in my opinion, elite, at least almost elite defenses in Georgia and Auburn, and he's gotten shellacked both times. We scored 3 points against Georgia and 10 points against Auburn. Now both of those games were on the road. Being at home helps, and Nick Fitzgerald's really sort of come into his own the last 4 games. We're riding on a 4-game winning streak, a dominant wins over Kentucky and BYU, a really good win over A&M on the road. He struggled against UMass, but the UMass, I guess, I hope at least it's one of those weird trap game sort of things, maybe looking ahead to Alabama, especially since a lot of teams have struggled with UMass this season, even in UMass's losses. But yeah, Nick Fitzgerald, dual threat guy. He's an incredible runner. I can't think of the exact number. I think he's either 4th or 5th now all time among SEC quarterbacks in rushing yards, and he's only a junior. He's still an inconsistent passer, but he's starting to improve on that. I mentioned really good performances against Kentucky, BYU, and A&M as a part of this 4-game winning streak we're riding. It's a good combination when you have the running and passing quarterback against Alabama. We mentioned the quarterbacks that Alabama has struggled against the last few years as long as Nick Saban has been in Tuscaloosa. I think that Nick Fitzgerald provides us with the best shot possible for us to beat Alabama. It's obviously extremely difficult to beat Alabama, but I think Nick Fitzgerald gives us the best option possible if we want to pull off the upset on Saturday.
Now, Daniel, if I'm not mistaken, you've got some injuries at wide receiver that could be an issue for you, and not a whole lot of teams make a living on running against the Tide. Of course, when you can run it from the quarterback position, that's a bit of a wild card factor, and you've got that in your favor. But can you address the passing game and the injuries possibly at wide receiver?
Well, we have injuries against UMass. Donald Gray, our senior wide receiver, probably the best wide receiver on our team, I'd be tempted to say, from Memphis, went to Gopi Island Community College. He was out for the UMass game. Keith Mixon, who's an under-the-radar wide receiver but has played some key roles on our team this season, he was out for the UMass game. Same with Gabe Miles, who's a senior wide receiver from Starkville. Gabe Miles is just a big question mark. We're not sure I'm not sure at least what's up with him. I remember he tweeted some somewhat cryptic thing about last week saying, "I hope I'm not out for the season," or something along those lines, but I'm not sure the status of Gabe Miles. Those are 3 of our best wide receivers right there. Now, Keith Mixon and Donald Gray were both out for the UMass game on precautionary measures. So I think there's a pretty solid chance they could be back before Alabama, and that's extremely important for those 2 guys to be back for the Alabama game, because they are playing vital roles in our offense. Now, even though we have those injuries, we have some pretty good guys backing them up. Guys like Dedrick Thomas and Farrod Green, for as examples, they have had significant impacts on the team. Dedrick Thomas had a really good game against UMass, had a punt return touchdown, which had been Donald Gray's one of Donald Gray's positions all year. So having a guy to replace Donald Gray in the return game is extremely important. In addition, we have guys like Jesse Jackson. I like to call him the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Obviously, he's not that, but I just like to say that as a joke. But yeah, I think those wide receivers have a good chance of coming back for this game. I think they were just out for precautionary measures, against UMass. So it would be extremely important for them to be back against Alabama, and I think there's a good chance.
And considering Jesse Jackson's probably all of 20 years old, his parents should have known that that could possibly be tagged on him at some point in his life. So I think they possibly opened themselves up to that, but nothing wrong with that. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, and Jesse Jackson with 20 receptions this season. Donald Gray questionable for this week at 24 catches. He's had much more prolific years there in Starkville in the past. All right, if we flip the script, then we talk Alabama running the ball, and Damian Harris has had an outstanding season, almost 9 yards per carry going into the LSU game. So the good news, Daniel, is even though we're talking 3 5-star running backs in the backfield for Bama, and this is their bread and butter, what they typically do best is they just come at you and they maul you and beat down a defense. LSU may have given Mississippi State some hope, because between Harris and Bo Scarborough, even Jalen Hurts out of the quarterback position, they were all around 3.5 yards per carry. Alabama only gained 3.2 per carry against LSU. So Jeffrey Simmons and company may be able to hold their own.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've seen really good performances against elite running backs this season. I mean, we absolutely shut down Darius Geis and LSU. That's just an example. We beat them by 37-7, 30 points. But, that's been the biggest problem for Mississippi State in the past, is giving up big plays, giving up chunks. I remember in 2015, Mississippi State was 7-2 going to that game. And Alabama was able to run. We got beat 31-6. And primarily, a majority of those points came from explosive plays on the ground for Alabama. So we just need to limit those. We've been able to limit them so far this season. And with Todd Grantham coming in as our defensive coordinator, we have really flipped the script defensively. A year ago, using Alabama as an example, we gave up 51 points, which at that time was the largest number of points Dan Mullen has ever given up in his time at Mississippi State. We were ranked somewhere in the 100s defensively in the nation last year. And we're really flipping that script, and we're one of the top defenses in the SEC, if not the country now. So we're extremely fortunate to have a guy like Todd Grantham coming in as a defensive coordinator, especially when we're facing a rushing attack like Alabama. And we've got, you mentioned Jeffrey Simmons, Leo Lewis at linebacker, Gary Green at linebacker. Montez Sweat has really come into his own at defensive line the last couple of games, and really throughout the season, but particularly the last couple of games. So yeah, I think definitely not going to guarantee that we'd be able to contain the Alabama running game, especially with their multiple options on the ground. You mentioned guys like Damian Harris, Bo Scarborough, and Jalen Hurts. But I think we've got a good chance to, and it's definitely a better chance than we have in the past.
Daniel Black joining us to talk Mississippi State football, with the Bulldogs hosting number 2 Alabama, and Mississippi State number 16 in the college football playoff rankings at 7-2, 3-2 in the SEC, looking to finish strong. And of course, this would be a monumental upset, although the point spread is just 14.5, which is a bit surprising to me. Not that Mississippi State's not a good football team, but Alabama typically taking care of just about everyone in their path by more than that, although they had a pretty workmanlike effort against LSU. So how hopeful are you? How hopeful is Bulldog Nation for an upset here?
Well, I think hope is the correct word. Alabama is just one of that juggernaut that Dan Mullen's never been able to figure out. We've beaten every team in the Southeastern Conference under Dan Mullen over the last 9 years, but we've never been able to beat Alabama. And honestly, we've never really truly come close. You can look at 2014, we lost by 5 points, but in that, when we were number one in the nation, but in that game we got behind 19-0, scored a touchdown in garbage time to make it 25-20. The next closest was 2013, which was a game in which A.J. McCarron came in and threw, I believe, 2 interceptions towards the end of the game, and they really couldn't get anything going offensively. Although we were 7-6 that season, we had a pretty stout defense. And then you look at down the line, we've gotten beaten by 20 in 2010, which was arguably Dan Mullen's second best season going into this year. 2015 was a 7-5 team. At home, we got beat by 25. 2012, we were 7-0 going to Tuscaloosa and got beat 38-7. So Alabama's just that. I mentioned it's a juggernaut. It's something that we have not been able to truly figure out under Dan Mullen. And I think a big reason for that is the talent discrepancy. I mean, Alabama's since 2009, they've gotten consecutive number 1 recruiting classes. And under Dan Mullen, which 2009 was Mullen's first recruiting class, our highest rank recruiting-wise nationally is 15. And we usually average about 25 to 30 in that range. So that's just talent discrepancy right there across the board. Now, less talented teams have beaten Alabama in the past, definitely, but Mississippi State's just a different thing. We're sort of lower in the recruiting rankings. Not saying that we have talent. We've got plenty of talent, but it's just that raw talent that you see in 5 stars that we really need. How hopeful are we? I'll just use my opinion. There's some extreme optimists who think we'll win. There's some extreme pessimists that will think we're going to get beat by 6 touchdowns. But I think 14-17 in that range is probably a good bet. I'm not confident that we're going to win the football game, judging off of past performances against Alabama. Alabama's been so good this year that it's hard to pick against them. If we can have a strong showing, maybe a 14-point showing, maybe even less than that possibly, I'd be pretty content going into a stretch of Arkansas, Ole Miss, and then a very good bowl game.
You understand, Daniel, when you throw out 14 points and the line's 14 and a half, people, that are resting on your knowledge here want you to make a call one way or the other, because more important than the outcome of the game is the outcome of the game. I'm just kidding.
Absolutely.
To your point here, I'm looking at the season series, or the all-time series. Alabama leads 79-18 with 3 ties. I was on the sideline for the 94 through 2000 games, but that's ancient history to you. But in the games that you're talking about here, Nick Saban lost his first matchup against Mississippi State as a member of Alabama in 2007. That's the last Bulldogs victory. Since then, to your point about the offensive showings against Alabama, and you pretty much ripped off a lot of these scores, but Mississippi State has scored since 2008, 7-3, 10, 7, 7, 7, 20 in the Dak Prescott game when they were number 1, 6-3. So no prolific, not even close to prolific, just non-factors offensively for Mississippi State. So that's a tall task for Nick Fitzgerald and company, just to basically mount some consistent offense and give the defense a chance to make this a game in the 4th quarter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Daniel Black, you can join him on For Whom the Cowbell Tolls. It's the SB Nation platform for Mississippi State athletics, and we appreciate the breakdown.
Well, thank you, Mark, for having me. I appreciate it as always.